Good morning, or no, good afternoon. It is afternoon now. We are continuing working with those integers. Today we are doing Po9. I can multiply and divide integers and fractions. So we're going to review how to multiply and divide integers and fractions. On the test, you will not be able to use your calculator for this part. We can check answers with it on our homework, but you have to know how to do it without a calculator. Because on the test, the front page of the test, there will be no calculators on that page. Okay, so we have to know how to do this. So, if we have a positive sign that's being multiplied or divided by a positive sign, our answer will be a positive. If we have a positive sign that's multiplied or divided by a negative sign, our answer will be a negative. If we have a negative sign multiplied or divided by a positive, you should be filling this in, our answer is a negative. And if we have negative multiplied or divided by a negative, our answer is positive. So if the signs are the same, two positives, two negatives, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, it's going to be a negative. So the first thing is we have to make sure we're doing our math correctly. Sometimes people get overconfident. I've known my multiplication table since third grade. I use them all the time. I know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm going to go super fast, and what happens when we go too fast? Claire? We make those simple mistakes. So slow your roll, make sure you're doing your math correctly. Then look to see, is it going to end up being positive or negative? So if we look at this first one, I don't think we've covered this yet, but when you were in 5th grade math, we would see 8 times 3 with the little x. Now we don't see that anymore. We see 8 times 3 like this. Why are we using that dot in the middle instead of that x that we've been using since 3rd grade? David?
Because I think we'll be using the x as a variable.
Because now that we're in the big kid math, we're going to be using letters as variables, and it gets confusing if we see the x as a multiplication sign and then we see x as a variable. So you will not see us using that multiplication symbol that looks like an x. That's no more. Now our multiplication is always going to be that dot in the middle. Okay? When we see 8 multiply minus 3, that doesn't make sense. What does that mean? 8 multiply minus 3. Is that minus 3? Oh, it means negative 3. So 8 times negative 3. So the first thing I ask myself, what is 8 times 3? You can tell me. Abby? 24. And then when a number is positive, we don't have to put the positive symbol in front of it. We just know it is positive. So I have a positive times a negative. So what will my answer be, Harper? Negative. What do I do for this one? Negative 10, parentheses 6. When there is something right in front of a parentheses, we don't have to put that multiplication symbol there. We just know that it means to multiply. So when we see something like parentheses, we know it's multiplied. And if it's something like a variable, we know that when there's a number right next to the parentheses, when there's a number right next to a variable, it automatically means multiply. We just don't put that multiplication symbol in there. So if you see a number right next to a variable, right next to a parentheses, it means you are multiplying it. So if I have negative 10 times 6, What do you think my answer is going to be, Christina? I like how you corrected yourself. We know 10 times 6 is 60, but then it's a negative times a positive. So it's going to be a negative 60. Always double check. Am I putting the correct symbol? Am I doing my math correct? And did I put the correct symbol? There will be some multiplying and some dividing mixed in here. Double check to make sure that you are doing the correct math. All right, well, let me scroll up. Fractions. So, how do we multiply and divide fractions? So to multiply, you can't use mixed numbers. So your first step is always to convert mixed numbers to improper fractions. Then we multiply straight across. What is our final step? What should our final step always be? Good? Simplify. Oh, I strongly recommend you putting that on there. So, convert mixed numbers to improper. You multiply going straight across. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Some of us remember how to cross simplify before we multiply across. That's fine. You're just switching up the order. So if you remember how to cross simplify from 5th grade, you can do that. And then you multiply across. How many of us remember what it means when I say cross simplify? There's a handful of us. Let me see. Let's look at this one right here. 6 over 7 times 8 over 9. If I wanted to cross simplify instead of simplifying it, well, let's work it out the way it is. Multiplying across, 6 times 8 is 48. 7 times 9 is 63. Can I simplify that? What can I divide out of both of those numbers? It's taking a lot of us some time really looking at that, really thinking about it. What do you think I could divide out of both? David?
6.
6 does not go into 63. Claire?
3.
I could divide out of 3. So that would be 16, and that would be 21. Sometimes it doesn't come to us right away, right? I know my multiples of 3, but all the way up to 63, it's a little bit more complicated when you get the bigger numbers. So, let's look at what it means to cross simplify. You do not have to do this. Some of us remember it from last year, some of us like to be able to cross simplify to make life easier when we get to our final answer. Cross simplifying means we look at our numbers that are on the diagonals. Is there a number I can divide out of 6 and 9, Christina? 3. That comes right away to us, right? 6 and 9, we know I can divide a 3 out of there. So I'm going to divide a 3 out of both those. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Is there a number that I can divide out of 7 and 8? No. So those numbers are going to stay the same. Keep them in the same spots of the fractions that they were on. So now I multiply across. 2 times 8 is 16. 7 times 3 is 21. My simplifying is done already. So that's why sometimes I like to cross simplify, so I don't have to do that big simplifying at the end. What number can I divide out of those big numbers? We get the same answer. So do I care if you cross simplify or you simplify at the end? No, I don't care as long as you simplify. At some point before your final answer, it needs to be simplified. Some of us are saying, yeah, I remember cross simplifying. It makes my life easier. I'm going to do that. Awesome. Some of us are saying, oh, I remember trying to learn that and it was complicated for me. I kept messing up. You don't have to do that. You can simplify at the end, and that's totally fine. Okay, I just like to expose us to different ways to doing math and seeing how we do get the same answer any way we do it. Fallon?
Does cross simplify with the division?
Yep. But only in a certain way. What do we do when we divide fractions? Luke? We have to find that reciprocal, and then we're multiplying. So when I say yeah, but only when we're at the multiplying part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't look at your division problem right away and say, oh, I'm gonna cross them, because you have to invert it first. It has to be at the multiplication part of the division. Always, after you do your math, checking to see, am I doing positive, positive? What's my final answer? Positive or negative? So, the multiplication is simpler. The division, let's look at this one. We keep our first fraction the same. We flip from dividing to multiplying, and if we flip dividing to multiplying, we flip our second fraction to its reciprocal. You have to flip it around. So if you flip dividing to multiplying, you have to flip to that second fraction to its reciprocal. Then you can cross simplify, you can multiply across, always making sure that the final product is as simple as it gets. 5 times 11 is 55, 5 times 7 is 35, negative times a negative is a positive. I can leave my answer improper, or I can switch to make it proper, to make it a mixed number. Am I done? Is my answer 55 over 35? Would that be a good answer? Why not, Tessa? I need to simplify. I could have simplified right from the start and said 5 over 5 is a 1. Okay, I could have simplified right in the beginning, but I didn't, and that's fine. So I'm going to divide that 5 back out. 55 divided by 5 is 11. 35 divided by 5 is 7. Big thing to remember is that negative divided by our negative gives me a positive answer. How are we feeling about dividing fractions? Most of us are remembering this from last year, shaking off those cobwebs. It's coming back to us. Remember, just like with multiplying, the first step is to convert mixed numbers to improper. So you always have to have it as an improper fraction, no mixed numbers. We don't want any whole numbers when we multiply or divide. I suppose I should ask. We remember how to make it into an improper fraction? Multiply the denominator by the whole number, add the numerator. I think we covered that already. All right, second page is word problems. Word problems involving multiplying and dividing fractions can be tricky because you need to not only decide which operation you're using, am I going to multiply or am I going to divide, but now you have to know how to set up the calculation. Sometimes it matters which fraction is first. If we're multiplying, does it matter which fraction is first? No. Because 3 times 5 is 15, 5 times 3 is 15. Doesn't matter which one comes first. When we divide, does it matter? 15 divided by 3 is very different than 3 divided by 15. So if you're dividing, it matters what we put first. You will find that some situations can be written using both multiplication and division, depending on how you set up your problem. So write the calculation for each situation, then evaluate. So you're going to write which fraction, multiplying or dividing by which fraction. What does it mean to evaluate? When we see the evaluate in the directions, who knows what that means? What do you think, Amala? Figure it out. Do the math. You write the calculation just like in our math packet. This is the formula for the volume of a rectangular prism, length times width times height. This is my calculation, 5 times 4 times 3. That was my length times width times height. Then evaluate it. What's the volume, right? So whenever you see evaluate as a direction, it means do the math. So let's look at our first one. You and 3 friends are sharing a quart of milk. A quart is 32 ounces. You each get 1/4 of the quart. How many ounces do you each get? What do you think the calculation is that we're going to be doing here? What do you think, Claire?
32 divided by 1/4.
So, if I say 32 divided by 1/4, what am I going to get for my answer? I know if I have a whole number, how do I make that into a fraction? Christina? Yeah, I put it over a 1. So if it's divided by 1/4, okay, so 32 over 1, I want to flip it to multiplying. So that would be 4 over 1. Multiply across, 32 times 4 is 128. Okay, so my answer is 128 ounces. Does that make sense? Robbie's shaking his head. He's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How many ounces did I start with? I started with 32 ounces. Can I get 128 ounces to be my portion of it? That doesn't make sense. Sometimes when we do our math, we're like, oh, I got it. I'm dividing it up. Because that 32 ounces we're dividing up. So I'm going to do my math. Always, always, always look at your answer and say, does this make sense? It does not make sense that I get 128 ounces when I only started with 32. Okay, so when the directions said that sometimes you can multiply and sometimes you can divide, sometimes you can do both. If I had 32 ounces, how many friends do I have? How many people am I dividing that 32 up by? Christina? 4. There's me and my 3 friends. So if I want to divide, I'm just going to say, okay, 32 divided by 4, and I get 8 ounces each. That makes sense. Or I could say 1/4 of 32 ounces. That word of means multiply. I want 1/4 of 32 ounces. So that means 1/4 times 32. So 1 times 32 is 32. 4 times 1 is 4. 32 divided by 4 is ounces. So I could do it dividing or multiplying, but I just have to know which numbers I'm actually dividing or multiplying. Am I doing it as a fraction? Am I doing it as whole numbers? We have to really stop and think about what our word problem is telling us to do. This is one where we could have done either dividing or multiplying, but we had to make sure we're dividing that whole number of 4. We're dividing the 32 ounces by 4 people, not by 1/4 of an ounce. So, big takeaway from this is to always check your answer. Does it make sense? If it doesn't make sense, try doing the opposite. If you were dividing by 1/4, try multiplying by a 4th. See if that makes sense. Right? Sometimes it comes to us immediately what to do. Sometimes we have to stop and think about it. Any questions on this page? So on the bottom, we do have that time for review. So you're going to do your word problems, really thinking about what math we're doing. Show your calculations, show all work. Okay, so show me what you're doing. I should not just see an answer written down. Show your calculations, show the work you're doing. Show your work. Eleanor.
For the first one of the review, it's asking us to order from least to greatest. That's kind of hard to show our work.
So when we see this directions, write the calculation for each situation, then evaluate, show all work. Is that connected with these directions? No. So you're taking the directions from the word problems and you're applying it to the review. It's a different section. So you're showing your work for the word problems, okay? Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Any other questions? Okay, if you are watching this at home, I hope you are well and I hope to see you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe and have a wonderful day.